The smell of wet earth and grass invaded Emily's senses, a fragrance she had only known from nature documentaries on TV. The rental car, a compact and absurdly spotless model, felt like a spaceship lost in an alien landscape. In front of her, the wooden gate creaked, announcing the arrival of a new owner who, ironically, wanted nothing to own. The news of her grandfather's death, a man she had barely known, had come through a short and cold phone call. "He left everything to you," the lawyer had said. And everything included this colossal ranch outside Bozeman, Montana, a universe of acres, livestock, and responsibilities that sounded more like a prison sentence than an inheritance. For Emily, a marketing consultant used to the relentless rhythm of New York City, the ranch was a nightmare. She wanted to sell, take the money, and get back to her life. Her coffee dates with friends, the constant hum of the city, but there was a problem. The bureaucracy was a tangled web, and she would need time. Time she didn't have, and patience, which she had already lost. She parked the car and stepped out, her thin heels sinking into the mud. Dragging her heavy suitcase behind her, she looked at the house. It was an old structure with a worn-out porch and windows that seemed hollow, like lifeless eyes. A deep melancholy hit her, not because she had lost her grandfather, but because of the cruel irony of fate that had dumped her in this place. "Don't be stupid, Emily," she muttered to herself, trying to summon courage. "It's only temporary. Get this over with and leave." The door was unlocked, and a cold echo filled the silence. Dust coated everything, a thin layer that testified to the house's solitude. The furniture was heavy, dark wood. Black and white photos of people she didn't recognize hung crookedly on the walls. Emily sank into the sofa, head in her hands. Reality hit her like a punch. She was alone, in a place that wasn't hers, burdened with the responsibility that terrified her. The rumble of an approaching engine startled her. Outside, an old, mud-splattered pickup truck pulled up in front of the house. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, his face framed by a rough stubble, eyes as blue as the Montana sky, sharp and unyielding. He wore a straw hat and a plaid shirt that had clearly seen better days. He walked toward her with a confidence that only deepened her sense of smallness. "Name's Jack," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Your grandfather hired me to keep the ranch running while he was sick." "I'm Emily, his granddaughter." Jack gave a slow nod, his gaze assessing her with a hint of disdain that made her bristle. "I know. The lawyer called me, said you'd be coming out here." He paused, glancing around as if the sight of a city woman standing in the middle of a working ranch was the most pitiful thing he had ever seen. Emily's patience snapped. "Look, Mr. Jack, I don't know what the lawyer told you, but I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with all of this. I just want to sell and move on as quickly as possible." A bitter, almost mocking smile tugged at Jack's lips. "Sell? And who do you think's gonna buy this place now? The planning season's about to start. The land needs work. Things don't move that way out here, lady." The words cut through her. He was right. She was lost, and worse, she depended on him, on a man who clearly thought she was nothing but a burden. Despair knotted in her throat. "I need help," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I'm doing. If you can help me, I'll pay you whatever it takes." Jack's expression softened, barely, but the skepticism in his eyes remained. "It's not about money. It's about work, dedication, and you don't look like you've got either one." His words stung. Emily closed her eyes, exhaustion weighing her down. This place, this man, everything was a reminder of how out of place she was. She felt humiliated. "Thank you, Mr. Jack. I'll figure it out." Jack didn't answer. He simply turned, climbed back into his pickup, and drove off, leaving her once again alone, with the weight of a ranch she didn't want and the piercing gaze of a rancher who clearly thought she was too fragile to survive in this world. As night began to fall, Emily realized, for the first time in her life, she had nowhere to run. Night fell like a heavy veil, and the darkness across the ranch was absolute. Emily was in the kitchen, lit only by the dim glow of her phone's flashlight. The generator was off, and she had no idea how to start it. The silence, once merely oppressive, now felt menacing, broken only by the whistle of the wind across the porch. She was hungry, but the fridge was empty, and the smell of mold kept her from even thinking about food. With her phone in one hand, she tried calling her sister, but there was no signal. Panic tightened her throat. She was completely isolated. No food, no light, and no clue what to do. Her usually organized, pragmatic mind was now a storm of fear and regret. Why hadn't she stayed in New York and handled everything from afar? A noise jolted her. Footsteps on the porch. Her heart pounded as she shrank back, the windows staring like empty eyes and the darkness outside pressing in like a predator. The door suddenly opened and the harsh beam of a flashlight cut through the gloom. "What the hell are you doing in the dark?" Jack's voice, sharp and impatient, shattered the tension. Emily let out a shaky sigh of relief, as if it had been stuck in her lungs for hours. "The generator. I don't know how to turn it on." Jack walked past her without another word, the flashlight catching his rugged face. He crouched, adjusted a few switches, and with a sharp roar, the generator kicked to life. The lights blinked on, flooding the house in brightness that felt almost miraculous. He looked at her, his expression dripping with judgment. "Figured you'd starve to death." Emily flushed with embarrassment, heat rising in her cheeks. I didn't have time to go to the store." Jack sighed and shook his head. "Here's the thing, City Girl. You're gonna have to figure things out. Life out here doesn't prepare itself for you." His tone softened just a fraction. "But I'm not about to let your grandfather's cattle go hungry, and I'm not about to let your granddaughter sit in the dark all night either. Come with me." He led her outside to his old pickup. Reluctantly, Emily climbed in, the smell of dust and tobacco wrapping around her. The ranch stretched endlessly in the night, the headlights carving narrow paths through trees and fences. A thin crescent moon hung above, stars scattered like jewels across a velvet sky. They pulled up to his place, a smaller house but warm, with golden light spilling from the windows. Inside, it was rustic but spotless. A fire crackled in the hearth, warming the room, and the rich smell of home-cooked food made Emily's stomach ache with hunger. He sat her down at the table and set a bowl of beef stew in front of her. The first bite nearly unraveled her, a flavor unlike anything she had tasted before. It was real. It was comforting. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice thick. "Really." Jack sat across from her, his face serious. "Don't get used to it. I'm only doing this because it's what your grandfather would have done. He was my friend." The mention of her grandfather struck her differently. For the first time, someone spoke of him not as a distant figure, but as part of her story, too. He was a good man?" Jack nodded, his blue eyes fixed on some faraway memory. "Stubborn as hell, but honest. We understood each other. He used to talk about you, said his granddaughter was smart, destined for more. He was proud of you, even if he didn't show it." The words hit her like a wave. She had never imagined her grandfather thought of her at all, less much with pride. Suddenly, the wrench didn't feel only a burden. It felt like a fragment of a man who had loved her in silence. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling freely down her cheeks. "No need to cry, city girl," Jack said softly. "That's life. What I can tell you was this. Your grandfather loved this land. It was everything to him. The real question is, what are you going to do with it?" Morning broke gray and damp over the ranch. A fine drizzle slicked the ground, making the earth even more treacherous. Emily woke in Jack's guest room, on a bed that was rustic, yet surprisingly soft. The smell of coffee and fresh bread drifted in from the kitchen, wrapping around her like an unfamiliar but oddly comforting embrace. She found Jack in the kitchen, standing at the stove. He wore the same clothes as the day before, the scent of earth clinging to him and mixing with the rich aroma of coffee. Without a word, he set a plate in front of her, cornbread and a slice of pound cake. "Thanks," she murmured, a little embarrassed. "I think I should probably get back to my place." Jack didn't look at her. "Day has been started for hours. You need to see the ranch, see what needs fixing, what your grandfather left behind. If you want to sell, you have to know what you're selling." Of course, he was right. She was behind, and truthfully, she was afraid of facing the reality of this place alone. Rain tapped gently against the window, the landscape outside painted in shades of gray. They stepped out into the drizzle, the cold seeping through her thin jacket. Jack guided her across the fields, pointing out crops, irrigation channels, soil conditions. His words were heavy with a vocabulary foreign to her, but she tried to absorb every bit. He showed her rusted tractors, broken fences, water lines that needed repair. The ranch felt like a sleeping giant, wounded, waiting for someone to breathe life back into it. "Your granddad always said the land talks. It tells you what it needs. And right now, it's in pain. It needs someone to listen." Emily looked down at the soaked earth, at the timid shoots pushing their way through. She had never once thought of land as something alive. To her, it was just property, numbers on paper. But here, under Jack's steady gaze, it was something else, something breathing, aching. They walked for hours. The rain thickened, soaking her hair and jacket, her city boots sinking deeper into the mud with each step. Jack finally stopped, watching her struggle. "What the hell are you doing in those shoes?" A small grin tugged at his lips. "You're ruining them." He went to his truck bed, pulling out an old pair of rubber boots. "They're worn, but they'll do. You'll need them." Gratitude surged through her chest. "Thank you, Jack." She crouched to pull them on, and the difference was immediate. For the first time, she felt steady, grounded. Jack's voice carried in the drizzle. "City life's a lie. People hide behind things. Out here, you can't hide. You are what you are. You have to be strong." The words struck her deeply. He wasn't calling her weak. He was daring her to be strong. And somehow that small shift encouraged her. The rain tapered off, and a sudden break in the clouds sent a golden shaft of sunlight spilling over the wet fields. The leaves glistened as if dusted with diamonds. Jack looked up at the sky with a quiet reverence that touched her. Bathed in the unexpected light, Emily knelt to study a tiny wildflower blooming at the edge of the path. She had never noticed something so small before, so fragile, yet stubbornly alive. Her fingers brushed the petals with gentle curiosity. On a winger, she was being watched. Jack's gaze lingered, on the way the light caught her brown hair, on her focused expression, the quiet grace in her movements. The image was a stark contrast to the nervous, misplaced woman who had arrived just yesterday. His lips curled in the faintest, unbidden smile. Emily looked up suddenly and caught him staring. For a split second, their eyes locked. A strange warmth climbed her neck, and she looked away quickly, her cheeks burning. The shy flutter in her chest was something she hadn't felt in years. She straightened hastily, flustered. It's really beautiful here," she said, her voice a little too loud, trying to cover the blush on her face. Her eyes fixed on the horizon, anywhere but his. Jack cleared his throat, looking away as well. Yeah, it's got its beauty. He seemed unsettled, as if he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. The air between them shifted, soft, charged with a quiet tension neither of them knew what to do with. "That's the ranch," he said finally, breaking the silence. "After the storm, the sun always comes back. You just have to wait it out." He nodded towards a small herd of calves grazing in the field. "We need to check the calves. Your granddad had a soft spot for them." He started walking again, a little faster this time, and Emily followed, her heartbeat oddly quickened. The sunlight lingered, but for her its warmth felt different now. Something had shifted. Timidity clung to her, yes, but also a curious spark, the faintest beginning of something she couldn't name, something taking root in that land and between her and the blue-eyed rancher. By the time Emily and Jack reached the cornfields, the sun was already high. The wind swayed the tall green stalks, producing a soft, rhythmic sound, nature's own melody. Emily, her borrowed boots now caked in mud and her hands streaked with soil, felt more connected to this place than she had at any other moment in her life. The shy awkwardness of the morning had melted away, replaced with an insatiable curiosity and an energy she hadn't known she carried. "We need to start preparing the soil for the next planting," Jack explained, resting a hand on the old tractor. "They say the tractor doesn't do the work. The farmer's heart does. It's the love for the land that makes the harvest worth it." "You really love this, don't you?" She studied him, eyes searching his face. He nodded, gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's all I know, and it's all I need." His words were simple, yet carried a weight that fascinated her. She lowered herself to the ground, thoughtful. "Teach me how to drive it," she asked suddenly, her voice alight with enthusiasm. He turned, eyebrows lifting in surprise. "You? Think you can handle it? It's heavy." "I can," she said firmly, surprising even herself. "I want to know what it really feels like, to feel the land." A quiet smile tugged at his lips. "All right, come on." He helped her climb onto the tractor, his hands briefly at her waist to give her a boost. The contact was fleeting but electric, sending an unexpected shiver through her fingers. Once she was in the seat, Jack positioned himself behind her, one leg on each side of the narrow bench, guiding her through the controls. His chest pressed lightly against her back as his strong arms reached forward, one hand closing over hers on the gear shift. She could feel his warmth, his breath brushing her ear, the scent of earth, sweat, and sandalwood surrounding her. "You need patience," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "The tract is like the land. It won't just do what you want. You gotta understand its rhythm. Move with it, like a dance." The nearness of him set her nerves on edge, but the image of a dance with the land intrigued her. She tried to follow his instructions, but the tractor sputtered and died. Frustrated, she sighed, feeling the vibration of his chest against her back. Jack leaned in closer, his hair brushing her cheek. Again, softer this time. She tried once more, gentler, more focused. The engine roared to life beneath them, and the machine lurched forward. She gripped the wheel, her pulse racing with exhilaration. "I did it!" she exclaimed, turning to him with a wide grin. Jack's answering smile transformed his usually stoic face, revealing a rugged warmth that caught her off guard. "That's just the beginning. You've got a lot more to learn." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of work and laughter. Jack was patient, and Emily, determined in a way that surprised them both, threw herself into learning. She stumbled, got dirty, nicked her hands, but for the first time, the aches and exhaustion didn't feel like a burden. They felt like proof of effort, of something real. By the time the sun dipped low, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and violet, they were both worn out. They sat side by side on Jack's porch, the cool boards creaking beneath them. He handed her a glass of fresh orange juice, and the crisp sweetness was the most refreshing thing she had ever tasted. "You've got potential," he said at last, breaking the quiet. "Just need a little more courage. So, what are you going to do with this place?" Emily looked up at the sky where the first stars were appearing. I don't know anymore. Before, I only thought about selling, but now I'm not so sure. I feel like I need to stay, at least for a while." He nodded, saying nothing, but the steady look in his eyes was enough. She felt understood without a single word spoken. The ranch was no longer just an unwanted inheritance. It was becoming a challenge, a chance to find a part of herself she hadn't realized was missing. And at the center of it all was the man beside her, the solitary rancher who was teaching her the dance of the land. The silence that followed her confession wasn't awkward. It was a comfortable quiet, filled only with the sound of crickets and the soft wind moving through the trees. Emily felt exposed, but not in a vulnerable way. She felt finally understood. The night on the ranch held a different kind of beauty, with no city lights stealing the spotlight from the stars. The sky looked like a velvet canvas sprinkled with diamonds. "It's hard," Jack said, his voice breaking the stillness. "Leaving behind what you know. The city, it's a world I don't understand. But folks out there seem to know exactly what they want." "Not really." Emily smiled, a soft smile barely touched by the moonlight. "In the city, you just get used to pretending you know. Life moves so fast, you don't have time to stop and ask yourself. It's like a race with no finish line." She looked at him, her eyes searching for his in the shadows. "Here, with the land, with the plants, they force you to be patient. You can't rush a seed into becoming a tree." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the sky, though his attention seemed subtly drawn to her. He started talking about the bees, guiding her silently toward the hives, the moonlight silvering his hair. The passion in his voice as he described the harmony of the colony was contagious, revealing a depth that pulled her closer to him. When they returned to the porch, the air between them felt denser, charged with an almost tangible electricity. The aroma of warm chamomile drifted up from the mug Jack handed her, a simple gesture, but one filled with care. She took it, though she couldn't take her eyes off him. The moonlight carved the strong lines of his face, highlighting the stubble along his jaw, the straight nose, the firm mouth. His arms, tanned and muscular from the sun, looked built for hard work. That plaid shirt she'd once thought of as worn out suddenly seemed perfect on him. She caught herself wondering how it would feel to touch the rough texture of his skin, the strength beneath that simplicity. "Thank you, Jack," she said, her voice lower than usual, her fingers brushing against his as she took the mug. "For everything. For teaching me, for feeding me, for showing me a side of life I never imagined existed." He turned to her, and in the soft glow of the moon, his blue eyes looked even deeper, fixed on hers with an intensity that stole her breath for a moment. A faint smile tugged at his lips. "It's what—" He paused for a beat. "What people who care do, isn't it?" The answer lingered in the air, heavy with meaning that went far beyond words. The night seemed to hum with a quiet tension, a palpable sense of expectation. Emily felt heat rise to her cheeks and lowered her gaze to the mug in her hands, though she could still feel the weight of his eyes on her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice husky, not daring to look up again. That moment, under the moonlight and the scent of chamomile, was charged with a silent promise, a mutual recognition of something blossoming between them,
far beyond friendship. They stayed there for a while longer, saying nothing, but it was a different kind of silence now, a shared silence, rich with unspoken meaning. When they finally said goodnight, the glance they exchanged carried a new intensity, an unspoken acknowledgement of the growing intimacy between them. Emily climbed the stairs to her room with her heart racing. Jack's blue eyes burned into her memory, certain now that the dance that had begun in the soil was unfolding in their hearts as well. The next morning came with the promise of another day of work and discovery. Emily woke up feeling strangely refreshed, yet a deep loneliness settled in her chest. The emptiness of the room, the silence that, even with the distant hum of Jack's tractor, seemed to scream the absence of someone beside her. She caught herself wishing the other side of the bed were occupied, that the room carried someone else's scent, that solitude wasn't her only companion. She got up, pulled on the same clothes from the day before, and went down to the kitchen. The smell of coffee and frying eggs filled the air. Jack stood with his back to her, working at the skillet. His body moved with a quiet, familiar efficiency, and she found herself watching the shift of his muscles under his shirt, the way his hair fell at the nape of his neck. The urge to step forward, wrap her arms around him from behind, and feel his warmth was almost overwhelming. "Morning," she said, her voice still rough with sleep. He turned and greeted her for the first time with a genuine but understated smile. "Morning. I thought you'd sleep straight through to lunch." Emily laughed, forcing a lightness she didn't quite feel. And missed the best part of ranch life? No way. She sat at the table and he set down a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon in front of her. The simple act of care struck her deeply, tightening her throat. He sat across from her, his presence both comforting and a sharp reminder of her own longing. They ate breakfast in silence, but it wasn't empty. It was a silence of comfort, of two people who no longer felt like strangers. They understood each other without needing many words. After breakfast, they headed to the garden. Jack showed her the seeds: tomatoes, lettuce, peppers. "We've got to pull the weeds. They choke out the good plants." Emily knelt and, with the patience he taught her, began tugging out the weeds. The work was meditative, but her thoughts lingered on him, on the way he moved, the strength in his hands. She felt a deep satisfaction with every root she pulled, but an even deeper one simply being near him, no longer alone. "You're doing good," he praised, his voice carrying a weight of approval. "You pick things up fast." "It's not that hard, just takes patience, like you said." She smiled, her hands covered in soil. He stepped closer and with his thumb brushed a small smudge of dirt from her cheek. The touch, so subtle and intimate, charged the air between them. His skin was rough and warm against hers. It had been so long since anyone touched her that the contact hit like a wave. She wanted more. She wanted him to touch her again, to kiss her. She wanted to feel his body against hers, to dissolve the loneliness in that single moment. We move so fast we forget to notice the little things, like a streak of dirt on a pretty woman's face. He murmured, his eyes locked on hers. "I don't think there's anything little about that," she whispered, her voice husky, thick with longing. The distance between them seemed to shrink with each heartbeat, and for a moment she was sure he would kiss her. She leaned in slightly, her pulse racing, begging for the contact. But the moment slipped away as quickly as it came. He stepped back, returning to his work. "Come on, we've got plenty to do." The intimacy dissolved, but the promise of it still hung in the air. A sharp pang of disappointment struck her, a flicker of loneliness pressing at her chest. But she carried on. She was no longer the desperate woman who had first arrived at the ranch. She was becoming the woman the ranch needed. And with every smile, every accidental touch, every lingering glance, she knew the transformation wasn't just about the land. It was about the man guiding her back to herself and the growing desire that kept pulling her closer to him. The afternoon melted into night, and the garden came alive under their hands. Emily and Jack, side by side, cleared the ground, prepared the soil, and planted the first seeds of a new season. The silence between them was now one of shared understanding, broken only by quiet words about the earth, the sun, and the promise of a future that, to Emily, no longer felt uncertain. They sat on the ground, exhausted, watching the moon rise. Sweat and dirt clung to their clothes, but the sense of accomplishment was the sweetest reward. Emily looked at her hands, calloused and dirty, and was surprised by the satisfaction she felt. Hard work, something she had always avoided, now seemed like a gift. "You don't look so desperate anymore," Jack said, his voice a low murmur in the dark. "What changed?" "You," she admitted softly. "You showed me that life in the city was a lie. It's not a race, it's a dance. And you taught me how to dance." He looked at her, and the distance between them seemed to vanish. "It's the land that teaches you. I just pointed the way." "No," she insisted, her heart beating fast. "It's you. You took me in when I had nowhere else to go. You showed me that fragility can be strength. And most of all, you made me want to stay." The words spilled from her heart like an overflowing river, a torrent of emotion she had held back for days. Jack's eyes, once pragmatic, now carried a tenderness that made her lean toward him. He didn't move, only watched her, as if tracing the map of her soul. "You saved me," she whispered, her hand reaching to touch his face. The roughness of his stubble, the warmth of his skin, everything was raw and real. A jolt of electricity ran through her at the touch. He closed his eyes, soaking in the affection. When he opened them, there was both acceptance and a desire he struggled to hide. "We save each other," he murmured, his hand covering hers with a gentle touch. That night, beneath the light of 1,000 stars, they didn't kiss, but the connection between them was so deep, so overwhelming, that a kiss almost felt unnecessary. It was the touch, the confession, the silence that spoke louder than words. They lay down on the ground side by side, their hands entwined, gazing at the sky. The exhaustion of the day gave way to the fullness of a feeling just beginning to root. Emily knew with unshakable certainty that she was no longer alone, and in the warmth of Jack's hand, she found the home she had never realized she was searching for. The ranch was no longer a burden, but a paradise, the place where she had found herself, and more importantly, the place where she had found him. The morning sun found them still lying in the garden, the dew covering their bodies like a silver veil. Their sleep had been light yet deep, and the feeling of waking side by side, surrounded by the very earth that bound them together, was a peace Emily had never known. She opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was Jack's profile. He was lying on his side, eyes closed, a serenity on his face she had never seen before. The roughness of his stubble, once so rugged, now seemed to fit perfectly into his quiet beauty. She watched him, amazed by the calm strength he carried. With each of his breaths, a new wave of tenderness and desire swept over her, and she found herself wishing time would stop, that this moment, just theirs, would last forever. She reached out to touch his face, but he moved first, opening his eyes. The deep blue reflected the cloudless sky above. He looked at her, and the silence between them spoke of an unspoken promise, of a future that, if only for that instant, felt certain. "Good morning," he whispered, his voice low and rough, a sound that made her heart tremble. "Good morning," she replied, her voice unsteady with emotion. He sat up and helped her do the same, his hand firm at her waist, grounding her. She felt safe, as though she had finally found a place to anchor herself. He didn't let go, and together they sat, side by side, watching the farm wake.
The birds sang, the sun warmed the soil, and between them, a spark caught fire. What came next felt both natural and inevitable. He turned to her, his thumb brushing her cheek to wipe away a smudge of dirt left from the day before. He lingered there, caressing her soft skin, a tender smile forming on his lips. A shiver ran through her, electricity coursing through her body, and the longing to be touched, to be kissed, grew nearly unbearable. He leaned toward her, and Emily didn't hesitate. She leaned in too, and their lips met. Jack's kiss wasn't what she expected. It wasn't hurried or careless, like the kisses of the city she once knew. It was slow, gentle, speaking of patience, of hard work, and of a love that had quietly taken root. A kiss that held the weight of whispered confidences under the stars and mornings spent laboring in the fields. With every movement, it seemed to say, "I've seen you, I know your strength, and I want you." When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. The world seemed to have stopped. There was nothing left but the earth beneath them and the love surrounding them. Emily, who once lived tangled in the uncertainties of the city life, found in Jack's kiss an absolute certainty, an anchor for her soul. She felt whole, complete, in a place that had once felt like her prison. "Emily," he whispered, and the way her name left his lips made her feel like the most important person in the world. "Jack?" she murmured back, her voice barely audible. The courage she had discovered to face life on the farm now extended to this new feeling that frightened her, yet filled her with an overwhelming joy. The smile on her lips was the smile of a woman who had finally found home. They rose to their feet, hand in hand, and walked back toward the house. The day's chores awaited, but now it no longer felt like labor. It was the beginning of a new life. Together. The farm, which once felt like a cage to her, had become the stage of their love, the place where the woman she was and the man he was had finally met to build a home. The following week was the happiest of Emily's life. The work on the ranch, which had once felt like a burden, had become the new rhythm of her happiness. She and Jack worked side by side, the silence between them filled with glances, touches, and smiles. With every task, their intimacy grew. He taught her about the crops, the weather, and the life cycles of the animals. She, in turn, surprised him with her ability to learn, to adapt. The city woman, once in heels and speaking the language of marketing, now spoke the language of the land, of seeds and harvests. Their relationship blossomed. Nights on the porch became a ritual. They would sit side by side, shoulders touching, hands entwined. Their stargazing was replaced by gazing at each other. Conversation, once about the ranch, now revolved around their lives. She spoke about her career, the pressures of the city, the loneliness disguised as independence. He spoke about his solitary life, the death of his parents, how the ranch was everything he had, until she arrived. "I never thought happiness could be this simple. I used to look for it in such complicated places. Sometimes all we need is someone to look in the same direction," he whispered, and her response was a smile. But the bubble of happiness they had built was fragile. The city, the world she had left behind, started to call. The lawyer, the real estate agent, her sister. Everyone wanted to know when she would return to finalize the ranch paperwork. The voice on her phone echoed her past life, a reminder that she couldn't stay forever. One morning, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was her sister, Claire. "Emily, what's going on? You disappeared. The real estate agent already has a buyer. They need you to come back and sign the papers." Claire's urgent voice hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. She looked at Jack, who was standing, watching her. He understood. The look in his eyes, once full of tenderness, now held fear. He said nothing, but the question was clear. "Are you going back to your life, to your city?" The city woman that arrived full of fear now felt strong, but the dilemma was immense. Leaving the ranch meant leaving the new life she had built, leaving Jack.
Staying meant letting go of everything she had ever known. They talked about it that night on the porch. The air, once soft and romantic, now felt heavy with uncertainty.
I I can't ask you to stay, Emily, he said, his voice thick with sadness. I have nothing to offer you. I only have the land. I only have my work. You have yourself, Jack, she replied, her voice trembling. And you're enough. Your life is there, your career, your friends. You can't throw it all away for a quiet-spoken rancher. Jack's words hurt her. He was doubting what they had. He was saying their love wasn't enough. For a moment, she felt like the city woman again, fragile and defenseless. What do you want me to do, Jack? Go back? Throw away what we've built? She asked, tears streaming down her face. He didn't answer. He just looked at her. The sadness in his eyes was the answer. He was leaving the choice in her hands without fighting for her, and that hurt more than any words could have. The night ended in heavy silence, each lost in their own thoughts. For the first time since she had arrived, the distance between them felt greater than the space between their bodies. The love that had grown quietly was now facing the noise of the world, and Emily knew that the decision she made would change both of their lives forever. The silence in the house the next morning was heavy and oppressive. Emily woke before the sun, her eyes swollen from a sleepless night. The smell of coffee wasn't in the air, and Jack's tractor sat idle in front of the house. He wasn't there. A cold panic gripped her, fear that he had abandoned her. She ran to his house, and the door was unlocked. Inside, it was empty. On the table sat a cup of coffee, steam still rising, and a note. Jack's handwriting was rough and simple. I understand. You have to go. The ranch is yours. Don't worry about me. I'll always be here. The words hit her like a bullet. He had interpreted her silence as a farewell. He had freed her from the ranch, but in his heart, he had left her behind. She ran to her car, her heart pounding, tears streaming down her face. She drove toward the city, each mile away from the ranch, each meter closer to the life waiting for her. Her loneliness consumed her. When she arrived in the city, the traffic, the honking, the rushed people, everything echoed her old life. She felt like a stranger in the crowd. She went to her apartment, and loneliness hit her like an avalanche. She was struck by a deep pain, not for the ranch or the rural life, but for the absence of Jack, his touch, his voice, his smile. She realized that her life before had not been living, it had been existing, and the life she had with Jack was her true life. She sat on her sofa, grabbed her phone, and dialed her sister. Claire, I'm not signing the papers. I'm not selling the ranch. Her sister was silent for a moment on the other end. What? Are you crazy? You know how much the ranch is worth. You know how much you'll lose? I'll lose everything if I sell, Emily said, her voice filled with conviction. I'll lose my home, my place, my love. She hung up and ran to the car, driving back to the ranch. Rain began to fall, and with every drop, she felt the world crying with her. The road seemed endless, but she didn't give up. She had to return. She had to fight. When she arrived, the tractor was still parked. Jack's house door was open. She went inside, and the silence was overwhelming. She sank to her knees, crying, her soul in pieces. And then she felt him. Jack's embrace. Strong, firm, and full of love. I knew you'd come back, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I knew your home was here. She turned, her face wet with tears, and hugged him. Their kiss was a reunion, a promise. In that embrace, she realized that the strength she felt wasn't her own. It was theirs. It was the love they shared.
The city woman had found her home in a place she had never wanted. She found her strength in a man who saw her fragility as part of her beauty. And among culture shocks and long days of planting, an unexpected love was born, a love that saved her from loneliness, teaching her to cherish life, the land, and hard work. The ranch was no longer a burden. It had become the stage of her love story, the place where the life she dreamed of and the life she needed met. And so the ranch flourished, and so did they. Their love became like the land itself, rooted, strong, and resilient against the heaviest rain or the hottest sun. Her grandfather had left her not just the ranch, but also the love of her life and the life she had always wanted.
If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and follow our upcoming videos to continue exploring new narratives.